All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Broadband Hui. This is meeting number 276, and I'm glad to see you all join us. Given the pretty crazy weekend, I think a lot of us had. Um, I'm open to hear any stories. I think there are a bunch of people that are still not able to access because of lack of power, so that might still be an issue. But again, I want to welcome everybody to the Broadband Hui. I'll go ahead and do some quick introductions, and then we'll get started in the agenda. My name is Bert Lum. I'm here on behalf of the Internet Society, and we've been conducting the Broadband Hui since March of 2020. And again, we want to bring community stakeholders together and kind of find out what's happening in your neck of the woods with respect to broadband and digital equity, and are there ways that we can help to bring resources to kind of help close the digital divide. Um, so with that, let's see. I wanted to share a little bit of what I was able to do, not so much during the
Oh,
hurricane,
that's
but
why I was wait for us to come in.
or maybe Linda, maybe you can
Okay, well,
get people to
Wait,
stay on mute.
I gotta go. Okay, talk to you guys later. Bye. All right.
I'll put her on mute. I wanted to share a little bit about um, my sort of experience, kind of pre hurricane, and part of what I was doing on the earlier part of August was actually heading over to Kaho'olawe to install a Starlink. And I wanted to kind of weave that into my, the manao of the day. So let me share this and share a little bit of a story about how that all went. So, I was on island on August 8th, and it was actually pretty nice. The weather was really quite calm. And one of the guys that was on the boat um, was aiming his telephoto lens up into the sky, and I also took my iPhone and sort of aimed in the general vicinity, and one of the shots that he was able to get was of this Eva. And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, it might be good to kind of reflect on the Eva bird, and came up with this sort of molelos. It's Heiva Kikahi. I'm sorry, Heiva Kikaha E Kaleva, and an Eva bird that soars in the sky. And I would show you the version that I took, which would look like a speck in the sky, but you could actually see the white head and the sort of pointed tail feathers. Uh, but this one was a nice shot, from telephoto lens. And I give him credit, Ross Kamimoto from the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission. So anyway, this was an really nice shot. Now, the reason why I thought it would be nice to sort of recognize the Eva was that this is a bird that really doesn't um, swim or anything. It's really kind of soars and glides on the wind currents, and it usually happens way, way up in the sky. Um, but then during the hurricane, somebody was filming kind of outside. I think it might have been either off of Big Island or Maui, and they were filming about half a dozen Eva birds that were kind of enjoying the wind that was occurring as a result of the hurricane. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting and pretty awesome to see how well they take, to the sky. So anyway, that's the Manao of the day, and I wanted to kind of bring some attention to the Eva bird. If you folks do happen to find yourself out in the ocean, uh, it's a really a cool sight to see, and I wanted to share that with you all. Now, I did want to share another photo, which kind of is a bit of a testament to the fact that the Starlink install was actually successful. And let me share this screen here, and I'll tell you a story behind it. Okay, so this is on the top of the island. This is what you're seeing in the background is the summit of Mo'ula. And one of the tests that I wanted to conduct, I did one from base camp and was able to plug it in and power the router and get connected via Starlink. And then the second test that I wanted to do, which was going to be a little bit more challenging, was take it outside of camp. And this is about 10 miles, um, a 10-mile drive from the base camp up to the summit. And this was powered by the Polaris. So I actually had the whole setup, router and antenna pretty much connected to the cigarette lighter in the Polaris, and was running the Polaris and had the Starlink mounted on top, and was able to successfully do a Zoom call from up there. And I do have a picture, um, and I'm going to be doing a little kind of like case study on this, but I do have a picture of me and James Pakele doing a Zoom call test from the top of Kaho'olawe. So uh, the whole purpose behind doing this was that, they do have a primary connection, which is serviced by a microwave connection from um, Lanai, and it oftentimes does go down. So this came up as a good alternative in the event that uh, they lost internet connection, at base camp. But the other added benefit of this is that you can actually take it and get it as long as you have power. You can actually set it up and point it to the satellite and have a pretty decent internet connection. And so hopefully I would like to see, more maybe some educational live streams, from Kaulave. But this is just a start, and another thing that, rather than power it from the Polaris, it would have been good to have like one of those Jackery power supplies that you could have a storage unit that you can take along with you and power it up, wherever you go. So um, I wanted to share that with you, and it was quite uh, not only successful in my mind, but it was a kind of an opportunity to test it out and see that it actually worked. And of course, I was a little nervous that it might not for some reason work, but it did work in Basecamp and it did work out at the remote site, as I just showed you. So anyway, that's kind of my story of getting a Starlink connected. And I would suggest that if people are interested in having an backup or alternative internet connection, this is something to consider. Okay, now with that, um, we'll go ahead and jump into our agenda. And I have the pleasure of inviting Councilmember Heather Kimbal from the Hawaii County Council to the bite to Broadband Hui, and I wanted to have her speak a little bit about um, Bill 170 and a little bit of background and what you see as being the goal, with Bill 170. So Heather, go ahead. You've got the floor.
All right, thank you, Bert. Aloha, everyone. Heather Kimball from Hawaii County Council, representing District 1, which is the Hamakua coast of the Big Island. I actually was an early member of the Broadband Hui. I don't know if you remember, Bert, but
Yeah, I do.
I was in those
Yeah.
early meetings, and then I got elected, and you scheduled the meetings on the days that I have to be in council. So I haven't had a chance to participate now for several years, but I'm pleased to see that you guys are continuing to meet and have these conversations because I do share a lot of the same values about digital equity and access across the state. So Bill 170 is a relatively simple bill from the standpoint that it only does really one thing, which is we have in the county code now, in our zoning code, which is chapter 25, a definition of data processing facilities. And these data processing facilities are permitted in the mixed use industrial zoning districts in the county, which they're not a lot of, but there are some. And it's kind of an archaic definition. It still refers to mainframes and just talks about use of digital data and documents and processing and whatnot. And so it's not clear that data centers would fall under that definition, but I think any good attorney from a data center facility could argue that they do. And so what our bill does is it creates a definition in our zoning code for data centers that really refers to the high capacity, high intensity data centers, and not those that are incidental to other uses. So we know, for example, Hawaii Telecom has a data center associated with their telecommunications work over here on Hawaii Island. UH Hilo has a data center that's associated with their work there. Those are incidental to their other main business as a public institution for education, as a telecommunication companies. These are really, and this definition is intended to be targeted towards industrial scale data centers. Now, the reason for doing this is that now that there is this distinct definition of a data center that is separate and unique from a data processing facility, it is not by right a permitted use in any zoning district in the county. Now, that doesn't mean they're expressly prohibited. It just means that they will be required to undergo either a use or a special use permit process. And that, for me, is the primary objective here, is to ensure that there is a certain level of scrutiny that wouldn't necessarily have been applied if it was a by right use in a zoning district. And that means, in this case of a special use permit, for example, it's going to have to go through the planning commission. A use permit is ministerial, that just goes through the director. But a second step here is to ensure that some of the things that typically wouldn't be evaluated during the use or special use permit process are evaluated in this particular case. We know that there are certain impacts that data centers have that other industrial uses don't necessarily have, and we can get into that if you'd like to later. But let me just step back. One kind of big step is why did I even start this? Why did I bring this forward? And through my time here in council, I've taken a pretty active role at the national level at the National Association of Counties. I'm a vice chair for their Energy, Environment, and Land Use Committee. And the chair for the last couple of years of our committee is one of the council members from Loudoun County, Virginia. And I'm sure that name should be familiar. It's Data Center Alley. They have the most data centers of any county across the country. It has been a revenue boon for them. They get almost over $1 billion in tax revenue from the data centers that are located in Loudoun County. So I don't want to act like that there isn't a trade-off here, right, for the counties between allowing them or disallowing them. There are economic benefits. There are potential job benefits. There are other, being located in the middle of the Pacific, people like, why would they want a data center here? I'm sure this group knows why they would want a data center here. Like latency matters, and having the strategic location matters. But what our chair for the EELU, he did an entire white paper on the impacts of data centers and the conversations around that. And that was really kind of the motivation for me to seek a pathway that required greater scrutiny, because we do have resource limitations here that could be significantly affected by industrial scale data center location. The water issue, as you know, has become less of a concern with these facilities. They have, managed to figure out ways to either repurpose the water within the system or cool it as it's being utilized. But the energy requirements and the effects on grid, we know from what happened over the last couple of days here, we have we have sensitivity in the grid, and so that's certainly a consideration, as well as like noise and setbacks and just neighborhood character and things like that. So that's the long story. I hope that gives you enough background. I'm happy to answer further questions about where it goes from here, or any other explanation of what the intent is.
Well, thanks, Heather. Uh, was your introduction of this, or your approach to this, primarily um, focused on the Big Island because there was potential opportunity for, uh, let's say, these larger data centers to consider the Big Island?
Yeah, it was. One of the questions that came up during conversation about this bill, even before it was introduced, was like, nobody's going to build a data center here in Hawaii. Land's too expensive, energy's too expensive, everything's too expensive. Um, and it just so happened that there were two different incidences where one was I was at a dinner, and one was I was in a hotel pool and got just conversing next to somebody that was in the same space, and like, oh, what are you doing here in Hawaii? Well, I'm here looking for a site for a data center. And
Oh,
so it actually became very real to me that, despite the fact that there is a lot of barriers to doing that kind of scale of a operation here, that there is interest. And as I said before, there's strategic interest, obviously, in having data centers located in the state. So it's that was part of it, is that I was hearing whisperings. I was having these conversations with people just in completely casual environments, like, oh, okay, we do need to start thinking about this. And so we happened to be in the process of working on our general plan for Hawaii County as this came up as an issue. And I initially tried to insert some language into our general plan that actually would create a framework or an outline for doing this analysis about appropriate siting, or whether or not it would make sense here in the county. That didn't go well, let's just say, in terms of the legislative process. So we have passed our GP now, and I've decided that to do this through a code amendment rather than actually adding the language into the general plan.
mm-hmm. No,
And
you're
it is county specific, the work that I'm doing at this point, although, every county should be taking this into consideration in my mind.
and you're right. Having been involved with the whole broadband infrastructure and digital equity, you're right about the kind of unofficial discussions that seem to, or conversations that seem to crop up every so often. I remember somebody telling me, "Oh, did you hear about, so and so? They're interested in doing a data center on the Big Island." And of course, what follows is, yeah, and they got, they're going to use geothermal to power it, and all this unlimited energy that could power a data center. Um, so yeah, these conversations do occur, and they've never resulted in an actual um, purchase, or a breaking of ground, or a build. So they sort of disappear, in the ether after a while. But it's good to see that you've taken some solid steps forward. Now, is there like a threshold for your let's say, qualification of what a large data center might be? What's the threshold from the smaller, data processing types of centers or the Hawaiian Tel data center? What's the typical threshold that you've identified in your, um, sort of permitting language?
Yeah, so I have kept the language intentionally broad, and the definition that I have used in our code, which I can read to you now in the proposed amendment, I should say, comes from the standard language used by the National Association of Counties when they do policy work around data centers. So it has a foundation in a legislative process, but we really here are distinguishing between facilities where data center activity is like their only thing that they do, right? And then separating that from those that are incidental to business, to public service. Our civil defense call center, for example, is going to have a data center associated, right? So I didn't actually specify intentionally specific scale or energy usage or size or anything like that, because that is actually better done through other means than in the code. And the
I
code
see.
definition should be more generally a broad definition. We don't this is using definitions in legislative policy is a strategy, but it's one you have to use carefully. You
Hmm.
really want to put the details in other parts. The policy should go in the code itself. The definitions should be generally more broad. It gives you a little bit more flexibility for policy work later on.
Yeah, no, great. Any questions? Gordon, what? I see your hand
It's
up.
Gordon. I do. Yep. Um, Heather, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. As a Comwella resident, I like this forward thinking. I also sit on the board as the governor's rep for Nelha. Has
Mm-hmm.
anyone approached Nelha to discuss this opportunity? I know they have land. I know we have water. I know we have ways of producing electricity. Right now, we're searching for a new director because our past director just recently passed. So, but just again, my question is: has the thought of approaching Nelha for this been made?
Not to my knowledge, but I wouldn't necessarily be one that would be in the know. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly a site that could be identified as potentially an appropriate site for the reasons that you mentioned. I noticed in the comment here there was something about the tech bros wanting to build data centers in space. Like I've heard about some of these other things, building it in space, building it in the ocean, the fact that miniaturization is happening pretty rapidly, and at some point in time, these very large scale facilities may not even be required. And so that's part of my thinking behind all of this. If I can kind of expand what you're asking, Gordon, is that we don't want to necessarily give away the farm for what is required now when this is such a rapidly changing industry. And we know that it's going to have would have significant impacts on the island. So, part of this is kind of stalling out the clock a little bit till we see where some of this technology takes us, and if these large scale facilities are really going to be something that's necessary 5, 10 years down the road. I think there's also a lot of skepticism about the AI market and if it's really as, are we in a bubble? And I think that's a legitimate question. A lot of these companies seem significantly overvalued. And so, are we going to see a major bust happen here? And the last thing our community wants here in Big Island is to have these places built and then not used, right? So I think part of it has to do with like this hesitancy around AI and just where the whole industry is going and delaying those impacts on our island until we have some more certainty around that.
Thanks. Sean, I see your hand.
Yes, aloha, Councilmember Kimball. I want to thank you for your leadership there and statewide at HSAC and also at NACO. I didn't realize you were co-chairing that. And I just was wondering if you have any observations about how the counties might be able to support the state in doing a better job of setting policy? Or is the state getting in your way, or is the state helping you as a county jurisdiction? I mean, just general, not blaming anybody, just asking.
That's a pretty weighty question, man. No, we always look at our state partners as somebody that we hope to work with constructively. But I can tell you it is a lot easier to get policy passed if you need to just convince four other people, or in the case of Kauai County, three other people that you're right and this is a good idea. And so this would not necessarily be the first endeavor that maybe started at the counties and was passed by all of our counties and then went up to the state. We've seen that happen with other policies that have been difficult to get through all of the legislators and that entire messy process that is the state legislative process. But yeah, we always look at them as partners, and I would hope that potentially, I spoke to the need to follow up with this particular bill with more details about what would be evaluated. So in a special use permit, for example, that is under HRS 205, there are guidelines in there for what the counties should consider for a special use permit. I would love to see language in there that says, okay, water, energy, those sorts of things need to be looked at in consideration for data centers. And, hopefully I can find a state legislator or two that will be willing to consider that as part of their legislative package for next session. But sometimes we just have to do things here at home. And, the counties are a lot more nimble when it comes to responding to actions and things that are happening in a very quick time period, because we are always on, we are always meeting, and we have the ability to pivot a little bit more quickly where we have the authority and jurisdiction to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, most definitely. Dan, I see your hand.
Yes, speaking of being nimble, and I see a lot of people in the broadband industry here today. Thank you for coming. Heather, any ways you can help the bead into the many bead new connections on the Big Island? Make sure that the permitting for that goes rapidly.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of tools at our disposal when we talk about permitting, just in general, right? Because the county has authority and jurisdiction over that. I think that there is often a hesitancy to use some of those tools, and that often has to do with who's going to take liability for expediting something, right? And I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but yes, with the bead situation, with other permitting requirements across the county, I think that there are ways to expedite things, and I'm happy to assist with whomever's interested in pursuing the pathways for that. But we have done some things already around solar installations, around some of the requirements that were coming through that seem overly burdensome with respect to housing development, and kind of forged our own path there. So, we're not unwilling to consider some of those options and pathways.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Heather, what's the path for this permitting as we move forward, right? Is it already finalized, or are there I guess the need for further council hearings?
So with regard to Bill 170?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So Bill 170's next steps is through the Windward and Leeward Planning Commissions. As to my knowledge, they have not yet been agendized, but they should be coming up very soon on the meetings for those two commissions. Both commissions will review and make recommendations on the legislation, and then those packages will come back to the council for council committee hearing. Depending on how things go in the commissions and public testimony, we'll either hold it in committee, work on it a little bit, or we'll pass it to council where it will have at least 2 more readings. So there's lots of opportunities to contribute and help improve the legislation as needed. We talked a little bit about the definition. I left it intentionally broad when I put it forward, but we did receive testimony during the first hearing that people wanted to see some refinement there. Absolutely willing to consider it. So, I do encourage folks on this call that have an interest to participate in this very public process and help, provide some guidance to me in terms of where to take this bill as it comes back to the council.
Any other questions for Heather? Heather, I have one last request. It's not really a question, it's a more a request.
Mhm.
On the Big Island, they've the I guess I would say that Big Island has always been kind of at the forefront of support for the broadband Hui and digital equity and broadband infrastructure. And of course, we saw that with Riley and Shola. And if we were to sort of fast forward to 2026, uh, that that sort of personnel support seems to have waned. I don't know if you notice it from a council standpoint, but from a county standpoint, we really haven't had much representation from the county uh, with respect to broadband and equity issues. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and not sure if there's anything that you could do about it, but that's what we currently sort of observe from a community stakeholder standpoint.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously losing Riley first to Nelha, and then, I was very sad to hear about his passing. I mean, has really, he was such a champion for
Hmm.
broadband access and digital access in the county. And so with the change in administration and having him move on, that has been a difficult shift. And I don't know if the folks that have replaced him in the department have the same level of expertise. And I certainly think that they understand and they care about broadband implementation, but they just don't have that same level of passion and expertise that Riley brought to the table. I am certainly open to, if we can meet on other days than Wednesdays, that'd be great. But, I'd be happy to help this group in terms of any of the roadblocks or challenges that you may be currently experiencing working with the county. And I'm here to assist. This is something that I'm interested in as well, and have tried to support in my limited ways over the years. But we'll happy to help facilitate those conversations if you are noticing a different relationship with the current administration. So
Well, and I'll let you go pretty quickly, but as to Dan's question, there's a lot of activity now going on with the BEAD program, and as well as I'm sure you've been following the HIFL, the Hawaiian Islands fiber link. So there's activity that's going on, and obviously permitting that's taking place. And it's not a council person's responsibility, the bird dog, the actual tactical deployment of permitting, but
Mhm.
it would be kind of good to have somebody in the county that's paying attention to some of that, and maybe able to get things moving along. But anyway, that's kind of the request, and
Yeah,
we can
no,
take this offline.
happy to suggest some people other than myself, but the reason I take a particular interest is because of the area that I represent. And
Hmm.
if anything during this storm, we really noticed how weak our access is. And when you have a system that's entirely based on submitting online requests for assistance, and people don't have cellular or any access to any digital interface, it's not going to work, right? And so the last couple of days here, I have literally been out with paper copies of forms for people to fill out so that we could get their needs assessed, because I didn't know how folks were doing in my district. I couldn't reach anybody. And so
Hmm.
I do have a personal interest just because of the nature of the area that I represent. So, but happy to talk more at another time.
Yeah, no, and thanks, Heather, and thanks for all the good work that you do, and thanks for joining us on the Broadband Hui. Really
Yes,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Take care,
O-
everyone. Have a
Okay,
wonderful rest of your week. Aloha.
all right. Now, thanks to Councilmember Kimball for joining us. I wanted to kind of move down our agenda and give Sean a chance to talk a little bit about some of the activities that are going on with some, major sort of mergers and acquisitions that are taking place. So, Sean, you wanted to kind of fill us in on some of the sort of details that you've been uncovering?
Sure. Actually, I'm not going to talk about the transfers of ownership issue, the mergers and acquisitions, but what I wanted to point out to folks is just as a general outline, the way that the state of Hawaii regulates cable television is through, so that would be Hawaiian Telecom and Charter, their cable TV services, which includes their infrastructure and institutional networks and broadband services to the university and the state through the INET. But the structure of that is that the DCCA is the regulatory agency. They have a cable TV division, which reviews those things. So I put in the chat a couple of links for folks who are interested in the overall process. In the last couple of years, DCCA has renewed the franchises for Charter on Kauai and Maui for over a decade. So these are very consequential regulatory proceedings. And they had really sort of sad outcomes, from my point of view. On Kauai, a reduction of funding for the local community access, and the county stepped in and replaced that funding. On Maui, it didn't go over. It's still pending litigation, I think. There's some appeals in process for what happened there. So I think the next charter renewal that's coming up will be Big Island. So Councilmember Kimbal hopefully will be involved with that. But there's one that just appeared. It's the first franchise renewal for Hawaiian Telecom. Since they started service on Oahu first, they're actually coming up for renewal for Oahu now. And so I put links in the chat for folks who really want into details here. But I mostly wanted to point out some of the testimony, in particular testimony by Senators Fukunaga and McKelvey. They submitted a written testimony to the DCCA that unfortunately, when you go to the link, it's kind of buried on page 35. What they did was they compiled all the written testimonies and made them one document. And I don't know why. Instead of being able to find a document, you have to search through this 95 pages. I think it's like page 35 of that document. But what the senators brought up that I thought was very important were about 5 different points, which I won't get into details here. But one of them was, first of all, it'd be really nice if the state would have a proposed decision in order for the public to review and comment upon. The way the process went for Kauai and Maui under the Green administration, there was no hearing on any proposed decision in order. They only had hearings on applications in the case of Kauai and Maui that were over a decade old, or almost a decade old. So it was really weird. There was no meaningful way for the public to participate. The state has not convened the one mechanism that exists in the statute, the Cable Advisory Committee, strangely, on these consequential decisions. But I think that hopefully, if there is, so most of the testimony that was submitted this round called for the DCCA to hold hearings on proposed decisions and orders. The senators did that, Media Council did that, Olelo did that. So there's really very thoughtful testimony if you want to take the time and look at it. But that idea of what is the state's process and introducing some integrity into that process is one of the themes. And there are others, but let me just focus on the one that I think the Hui might be the most interested in, and that is the cable regulatory process calls for a community needs ascertainment. What are the local community's needs and interests with regard to cable network services? And sadly, I have to say, if you look at the Hawaiian Telecom community needs ascertainment, it's a customer service survey. It doesn't really ascertain any of the local needs and interests, doesn't even look at the Hui's work, doesn't look at the News Desert study, doesn't look at lots of things. So that was a major flaw. And again, the majority of testimony asked the state to continue and actually complete a comprehensive needs ascertainment. So if the state steps up and does that, I think the Hui could have a lot of really interesting engagement to sort of help inform state policy in regard to regulating Hawaiian telecom and charter. So that's my overarching theme. I think the links go very deep if anybody's interested. I also just wanted to say if anybody takes an interest in this topic, I've been doing it for 20 years, so I'm very Hawaii, California, nationally. So I'd be very interested in talking to anybody who's interested in getting involved with these issues. And appreciate the time from this call. And so that's good for me for now. I'll be happy if there's questions. I'm here.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sean. And you've always been an advocate, and the Broadband Hui is composed of community stakeholders that should have an interest in some of these, kind of changing dynamics within the industry. And I think, yeah, it's good to be able to voice the community interests and community concerns. Any questions for Sean? Sean, well, obviously, there are some other activities that I'll bring some attention to later on with respect to our Hawaii School on Internet Governance and activities that are coming up in early September. So I'll save that for the end. But I wanted to give Mateo, who's been patiently waiting, and what time is it in Yap, Mateo? Must be pretty early.
It's 5:45 right now.
Oh, okay, well, thanks for getting up early, and I asked Mateo to share a little bit about Beamlink. We talked about DHHL and the presentation that they did, and I saw Beamlink mentioned in there with respect to helping to take advantage of the 2.5 gigahertz. And so, Mateo, at high level, what does Beamlink do, and how do you see helping to perhaps take advantage of the 2.5 gigahertz frequency in support of the DHHL license?
Yeah, no. So hey everyone, great to be here. And no, thanks for putting me last, Bert, because I've been nursing my coffee the whole time, and now I'm good to go. But if you made me go first, it would have been really ugly. So no, we're good. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question, I think actually I want to go a little bit to talk about why I'm here in Yap. And I think that'll give some context to kind of what we plan to do in the state. So basically our model is we're sort of like a carrier, sort of like an equipment vendor for building cell networks. And we kind of draw that line very differently than most of the telecom industry currently does. And the reason for that is I think part of the problem that you see in getting cell networks built and getting them to actually provide the connectivity that people want and need is the way that the industry is currently delineated. So you have really to no fault of the existing carriers. I think actually, if I was going to blame anyone, it would probably be the vendors more than anything. The structure of the kind of the way that like cell towers get built is just really, really, really archaic. And so we kind of designed the tech for that. We have our own, vertically integrated hardware, software, kind of everything that we need stack to build a cell network. But then we went to kind of look at the model of actually just going and selling it to existing carriers. It really doesn't make a lot of sense because we're kind of addressing a lot of problems that they have, but not the main problems that they need. And so sort of restructuring that business model is actually the part that sort of helps the most. So what we do now is we basically go out to an area, we finance building an entire new cell network in that area, and then we'll work with a local carrier to basically sell the phone plans. All the stuff that requires really, 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 local knowledge and understanding. We try to build as many partnerships as we can because we're not going to be experts in every single place that we go to. Get someone local who has all that knowledge and knows local marketing, local language, everything else. And then we'll basically do the super repeatable part of actually building the network. And that is, in our stack, at least, pretty much the exact same process everywhere in the world. And we actually get to reuse a lot of tech. So we're spending a decent amount of money here in Yap because this is one of the first ones that we're building at this scale. But then we can basically, it'll cost us way less to go and do the same model everywhere else after this, because a lot of the infrastructure we're laying down here is actually sort of like reusable infrastructure in the next deployments. And so what we plan to do in our network here, YAP for reference, for those who aren't as familiar, is one of the 4 states in FSM, and it's about a 7,000 person population. It used to be about 16,000, 5, 7 years ago. And a lot of people moved off the island because of the lack of connectivity. And so we're covering the entire state right now with connectivity. And we're actually making sure the capacity is that if a bunch of people move back because there's now connectivity, we can still handle that influx. And we do what we do just because we like getting connectivity to people. And honestly, profitability is kind of like an afterthought in our case. But since we're funded by, getting sort of debt funding in to build a lot of these networks, we do have to show some level of profitability. So for what it's worth on that side, we could be covering, for the infrastructure we're putting down, we could be covering about 2,000 people. And the revenue that we get off of those phone plans, would be enough to justify the network we're building here. So, covering 7,000, maybe even, up to like 10,000, is automatically like a completely different landscape. Whereas, your typical carrier model would cost easily millions, if not probably in the tens to hundreds of millions to build a network here, and it would almost never be profitable. So we're able to go to a lot of places that just don't make sense for other carriers to go. But anyways, that's kind of some context there to get at why Bert wanted me to talk today. So DHHL has been sitting on this 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. And there's a lot of areas, within not just DHHL lessees, but within the state in general, that still have pretty subpar connectivity. And whether that's the like road to Hana, whether that's like Eastern Molokai, it kind of there's different reasons in a lot of those places, but it's all stuff that we can really, really easily address. I guess a little bit of show and tell for context. I can't show much outside here because it's still dark, but like these are our towers. They're really small. They use less power than a light bulb. We can get 200 people online in about a mile range out of one of them. And we can use any frequency. So that's another thing that's really nice about us. So we can basically take in that 2.5 gigahertz and use that. We can use what we plan to do is actually use a combination of 2.5 gigahertz and CBRS. And then we can cover pretty much the entire state, running on that. And to your point, Sean, CBRS is definitely one of those things that I think it gets some uses here and there in telecom. And I think it's really underutilized. It's a brilliant, kind of regulatory standard. So we like natively support not just CBRS, but even the licensing and everything else. We worked with Google and with the UN on kind of the way that we actually approach sort of what is technically a carrier and what is the way that we're doing like the CPE licensing for CBRS. And so we can set up towers with actually basically anyone of any qualification can go put up a tower and it'll report everything it needs to report and get online. And so the usual setup process for CBRS, it's a little bit annoying and complicated. For us is like a breeze. So that plus 2.5 is more than enough spectrum for us to be able to cover the entire state. And so I want to be careful how I say this because we don't have this in writing with DHHL. This is still something that we're evaluating and we're kind of figuring out how we want to go about it officially. But basically our plan is to get coverage first to all the areas that the other carriers have sort of failed to connect. And then sort of in the process of that, but also potentially as a second step after that, begin to expand coverage and hopefully lower costs of connectivity in general for the entire state.
No, that's great, Mateo. And I wanted to also give a little bit of context as to how Mateo and I met. And this goes back to 2023 at the Kauai Ho'ike, right? And so we met there, and he took it upon himself to show up and see what's going on in Hawaii. And that followed with a really kind of a chance meeting that took place in Geneva, right? In 2020, was it 2024?
I think
No?
so, yeah.
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 So 2024, distinctly recall. Oh, no. I think it was 2025. It was right after I remember, Trump terminated our Digital Equity Act, and I got a chance to go to Geneva, and I'm walking down the hallway and I hear my name being called. I'm thinking, who's calling my name in Geneva? So that was Mateo. And then um Mateo, you came to the Ho'ike that was in Honolulu, right?
Yeah.
I think that was the same year. And hooked up with some of the players, one of them being Jaren, right? So I think that he's Mateo's been definitely spending some time and energy in Hawaii. So I really appreciate that. I wanted to give people the sort of the context of how did you end up on the Broadband Hui? And I wanted to give it over to Dan and let Dan ask his question.
Okay, thank you. I have been to Yap decades ago. So what's your relationship to the FSM carrier? Are you a competitor, a supplier, or whatever? And then what about the outer islands of Yap? Are you Starlinking them into your system, or what?
So, yeah, great questions. We're definitely a competitor with FSMTC. Um, our model is interesting, right? Because we can work with carriers. We can also be a carrier ourselves. And so, in the case here, our partner is actually iBoom, who's sort of this much smaller carrier. And given when you were out here, I don't think they existed at the time. But basically, they started competing on fiber because TC's prices were frankly predatory and just the service was garbage on the fiber side. So iBoom kind of started as an ISP, local ISP, specifically Yappies, not FSM National, and basically just running their own fiber. They got some from the cable landing, and then started running their own network here, and sort of forced competition and brought prices way down, and brought quality of service way up. And that was great. And then they tried to do the same thing for cellular, and they could not figure it out because cellular is just an absolute, mess. And so that's where we started talking to them. Interestingly, Bert, I got to keep giving you credit here. But no, this was actually out of that first Hoika that I went to, or I guess technically it was the second, right? The one in Kauai. This was out of that too, that I was talking to Glenn Hunter, the broadband director for CNMI. And he originally had worked a lot with iBoom on getting that fiber stuff set up. And so he connected us here. And yeah, so we basically are looking at it as, all right, FSMTC, very predatory on the cellular side too. I mean, for reference, you get charged when your phone is ringing, even if you don't pick up. Like we're talking really, really old school pricing models that should be gone by this day and age. It's almost impossible to get a postpaid plan in general. Everything's kind of prepaid, really terrible prices. So, just from sort of an equity perspective, even if we were to make $0, like there's a ton of reason to build this. And then I'm sorry, Dan, you asked two parts to that question, and I'm forgetting the second part of that.
No, I think you covered. I think you covered most of it there. I mean, obviously, the context for DHHL is that they have some 2.5 gigahertz, and I understand that they got to use it or lose it. And for information, my connections are with Micronesia are through Marshall Islands. where I years ago did compete with the PTT monopoly um, on hotels and stuff. So no, thank you. I guess you might comment very briefly on DHHL connection.
Well, Dan, I'm going to have to sort of wind down here, and I'm going to invite Mateo to come back on, and I think he's one of my connections to provide us some updates with, especially the 2.5 gigahertz. So, Mateo, much mahalo for joining us. I did want to kind of conclude with letting everybody know that our next Broadband Hui is going to actually take place over during our Hawaii School on Internet Governance on September 4th. So instead of having a Broadband Hui on the Wednesday, we'll do the Broadband Hui. And this is going to be a little bit different because we're actually going to be in a sort of all-day symposium, and the link is in the chat. I invite everybody who is available to join us, on September 4th. This is a symposium that's taking place over at ServPAC. And please sign up. And if you are able to get out there, I would highly suggest that you stick around for Pauhana because we're going to be doing Pauhana over at the 604, which is a restaurant right next to the ServPAC facility. So if you're able to join us, we're gonna be doing kind of like the Broadband Hui in-person version on September 4th, which is Friday, and we're gonna be doing it in Mililani. And if you're able to join us for the day, that's great. If you're um, willing to just kind of come out and hang out, we're gonna be during happy hour Pauhana around 4:30-ish. Going to be over at the 604. So um, take a look at the Luma, and if you haven't already signed up, feel free to sign up. I'm using the Luma as a way to kind of get a head count. We'll be providing some food during the Pauhana, so it's an open invitation for anybody that's on the Broadband Hui. So with that, again, next Broadband Hui, September 4th, Friday, as part of our Hawaii School on Internet Governance. So any questions about that? No, no, good. I hope I see some of you there. I want to end with our closing slide here. Hold on, let me get it. Let's see, where is it? Well, I think I might have to dispense with the closing slide here. I think oh, here it is. Okay, here we go. Whoops. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for being a part of the Broadband Hui 276. Again, next one is going to be on September 4th. And I hope I see you all there. Hope you folks all have a safe rest of August. And until September, y'all stay safe. Y'all stay awesome. Aloha, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Aloha.
Mahalo, Bert.